It wasn't a sudden change, but rather something that had built up over time, something that no one had been able to explain. One by one, the lights in the sky had dimmed. Ships and space stations, once filled with the hum of activity, had gone completely still. Communications were cut off, and even the stars themselves seemed to lose their spark. The universe, once a noisy expanse of life and movement, had fallen eerily quiet. Admiral Aria Lawson stood at the front of the observation deck aboard the Sentinel, her eyes staring out at the empty vastness of space. Her ship was one of the few still operating, but even it felt like it was floating in a void. There was no news from Earth, no word from any of the other space colonies, and no contact from alien species they had previously known. It was as if the entire universe had just stopped. She wasn't sure how long it had been since the silence first began, but it felt like a lifetime. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. The crew aboard the Sentinel had tried everything they could think of to restore communication, but every attempt failed. The silence was all-consuming. It was almost as if something, or someone, had deliberately shut down the universe's ability to connect. "Admiral, we've finished scanning the area," said Lieutenant Oliver, stepping into the room and breaking their thoughts. He was a young officer, sharp, but even his usual confidence had been shaken by the vast emptiness surrounding them. "There's nothing. No signals. No life signs. It's as if we're the last ones left." Aria turned away from the viewport, her mind racing. "We can't be the last ones. There has to be something. Someone out there." She was determined to find out what had caused the silence, and more importantly, if it could be reversed. She had a duty, not just to the crew of the Sentinel, but to every living being across the galaxy. The silence wasn't just an absence of sound, it was a threat. The silence, Aria thought, wasn't natural. It was the kind of quiet that made the air feel heavy, the kind that filled a person's mind with unease. It was a void that demanded answers. "What's the next step?" Oliver asked, looking at her with a mixture of uncertainty and hope. "We head to the last known coordinates of the distress signal we received. There's no other choice." Her voice was firm, but inside, her heart was racing. The crew had no other leads, no other options. Their only hope was that this last mission would give them the answers they so desperately needed. As the crew prepared for departure, Aria couldn't shake the feeling that this journey would change everything. The silence had already taken so much, but Aria was determined that it would not take their future. Humanity's voice, though faint and uncertain, would be heard again. She would make sure of it. With a final glance out at the endless, empty space, Aria Lawson gave the order to move forward. The Sentinel's engines roared to life, breaking through the silence as it headed into the unknown. The universe might have been quiet, but humanity was still here, and they would fight to be heard. The crew of the Sentinel moved quickly, preparing for the mission ahead. Time was against them, and the unknown stretched out before them like an endless dark ocean. The silence of the universe seemed to weigh heavier with each passing second. Admiral Aria Lawson stood in the command center, looking over the star maps displayed on the large holographic screen. A small red dot blinked on the map. Distress coordinates. It was the only sign of life they had received in months, and it was their last hope. The signal had come from the distant Zora system, deep in an uncharted part of space. The coordinates were sent just before the silence began, and no one had heard from that area since. It was a long shot, but it was all they had. "Captain Lawson," said Commander Ray, a seasoned officer with a calm and steady demeanor, "we've done all we can with the equipment. We've restored the communication system enough to send a signal to Earth's last known location, but there's no guarantee we'll hear back." "I know," Aria replied, her voice steady but tired. "But that's why we're going to the Zora system. If we're lucky, we might find something that can explain all of this. If we're unlucky, well, we don't have the luxury of waiting any longer." The crew was nervous. Each of them had their own reasons for joining the Sentinel, but none of them had ever expected something like this. The universe had gone silent, And now, they were racing against time to uncover the truth. But there was a strange feeling in the air, something that made everyone uneasy. Some whispered it was the uncertainty of their situation. Others said it was the feeling of being watched, even in the emptiness of space. How long until we reach the Zora system? Lieutenant Oliver asked, stepping up beside Arya. He was always asking questions, trying to make sense of everything, but even he couldn't hide the fear in his eyes. 2 days, Arya answered. We should be able to get there before the next cycle begins. Once we arrive, we'll conduct a full scan. If there's something out there, we'll find it. The crew went to their stations, getting ready for the journey. The hum of the ship's engines and the soft chatter of the crew filled the room, but it wasn't the same as it used to be. There was no laughter, no excitement. Everyone was too focused, too afraid. As the ship sailed deeper into space, Arya couldn't help but wonder what they would find. She had no illusions of what they might encounter. The universe was vast, and whatever had silenced it could be more powerful than anything humanity had ever faced. I'll make sure we're ready, Commander Ray said, breaking her thoughts. Whatever we find, we'll face it together. Arya nodded, looking out into the infinite stars. The crew had become her family, and this mission, whether they were ready or not, was their last chance. She wasn't sure what they would find at the Zora system, but she was certain of one thing. Humanity would not go quietly into the void. They would fight to the end, and their voice would be heard. With that thought, the Sentinel moved deeper into the darkness, towards the unknown. The Sentinel cruised through the empty expanse of space, its crew tense and alert. The 2-day journey had felt longer than expected, with every passing hour stretching the crew's nerves thinner. The silence that enveloped them felt even more suffocating now that they were so close to the unknown. Admiral Arya Lawson paced back and forth in the command center. The Zora system was just ahead, and they had yet to pick up any signs of life. The stars seemed to fade out as the ship approached the uncharted area. It was as if the universe itself was holding its breath. Admiral, Lieutenant Oliver's voice broke through her thoughts. We've detected something. It's an object, just past the outer rim of the Zora system. Can you identify it? Arya asked, her heart racing. Her crew had been scanning the area for hours with no results. And now this. Not yet, ma'am. But it's big, and it's not responding to our signals. It looks like a derelict ship or something else. The word derelict made Arya's stomach drop. If it was another abandoned ship, it could be the answer they had been searching for. Or it could be another mystery. A warning, perhaps. Whatever it was, they needed to investigate. Set course to intercept, she ordered. Prepare for a scan. Let's find out what it is. As the Sentinel altered its course, the crew gathered in the observation room. The object grew larger on the radar, slowly taking shape as they approached. It was a ship, though not like any the crew had seen before. The ship was massive, its design sleek and alien, with strange markings and glowing symbols across its hull. It was drifting aimlessly, not responding to any signals, not moving. It's completely dead, Commander Ray said, his voice low. It doesn't look like it's been attacked, though. No signs of battle damage. It's almost as if it just stopped. We need to board it. Arya decided, her mind already calculating the risks. Prepare a boarding team. Let's see what we can find. The team was quickly assembled, and they made their way to the airlock. Arya, Ray, and a few officers suited up and stepped into the airlock, their hearts pounding in their chests. They had no idea what they would find aboard this mysterious vessel, but they were ready to face it. As the airlock opened, the cold, empty air of the derelict ship rushed in. The crew stepped into the dark, quiet hallways, their footsteps echoing. The ship was eerily still, but there was something off about it. The walls were smooth and metallic, and the floors were covered in a thick layer of dust. It had clearly been abandoned for some time. The team moved cautiously through the ship, scanning every corner. They came to a large control room where a holographic display flickered weakly to life as Arya approached. The symbols on the screen were unfamiliar, and she couldn't make sense of them. "It's all in another language," Lieutenant Oliver said, trying to make sense of the information. But there was something more unsettling than the language. In the middle of the room, Arya noticed a strange device. It was small, glowing faintly, but it didn't look like anything she had ever seen before. "Get a sample of that device," Arya ordered. "We'll take it back to the Sentinel for analysis." As the team carefully retrieved the device, the silence of the ship seemed to grow heavier. It was as if they were being watched, though there was no sign of life. Something about this ship didn't feel right. They needed answers, but Arya had a nagging feeling that they had just uncovered the beginning of something much darker than they had ever imagined. As the team made their way back to the Sentinel, Arya looked out into the dark, empty space. The void was still silent, but she felt a whisper, something lurking just beyond the edge of their understanding. Back aboard the Sentinel, the mysterious device sat in the center of the lab, glowing softly as scientists worked around it. Its surface was unlike anything the crew had encountered, smooth, metallic, and etched with symbols that pulsed with a faint light. Lieutenant Oliver stood by, watching as Dr. Laura Hayes, the ship's chief scientist, carefully examined the object. "It's strange," Dr. Hayes said, tapping her fingers against the device. "The material feels like nothing I've ever touched before. It's almost as if it's alive in some way." Arya paced around the lab, trying to focus. The object was their only clue, but it had yet to yield any answers. There was a tension in the air, and the crew was growing more anxious with each passing hour. The silence that had overtaken the universe still hung over them, heavy and unyielding. "Any progress?" Arya asked, trying to sound calm, but her impatience was clear. They needed answers, fast. Dr. Hayes glanced up from her instruments. "I'm beginning to decode something, but it's strange. The patterns in the symbols resemble nothing we've seen from any known civilization. It's almost like a forgotten language, buried deep within the ship's systems." Oliver stepped closer, his curiosity piqued. Could it be alien? Some sort of warning or message? Dr. Hayes hesitated before replying. "Possibly. But the signals they're sending are different from anything we know. It's not even trying to communicate in the traditional sense. It's more like it's scanning us." The idea of being watched sent a shiver down Arya's spine. What if this device wasn't just a tool? It was something far more dangerous. Could it be the cause of the silence? Could it be the very force that had wiped out all communication across the universe? Before Arya could voice her concerns, Dr. Hayes's voice broke through her thoughts. "Wait, something's happening." The device on the table flickered, then hummed. Slowly, a holographic display emerged from it, casting a faint glow across the lab. Arya and the others gathered around it, staring in awe as the symbols began to shift, rearranging themselves into a form they could understand. The screen flickered again, and a message began to form. The first words were unclear, almost like static, but then it became sharper. "You are the last." A cold silence filled the room as the crew absorbed the words. Arya's heart skipped a beat. The last? Last of what? Dr. Hayes tapped on the controls, trying to keep the display from glitching. As she did, more text appeared. "The silence is coming. You will be the final witness." "What does this mean?" Lieutenant Oliver muttered, his voice filled with confusion and fear. Arya's mind raced. This device, it was a warning. A message from something ancient, something powerful. But what did it mean by the last? Were they the last survivors of a cosmic catastrophe? And what was this silence that the message spoke of? Before anyone could respond, the hologram flickered again, the message disappearing as quickly as it had appeared. The device powered down, leaving the room in complete silence once more. For a moment, no one spoke. The weight of what had just happened pressed down on the crew. Arya, however, wasn't one to be easily shaken. She stood up straighter, her mind already moving forward with the next step. "Get ready," she said, her voice firm. "We need to follow this lead. Whatever's out there, we need to find it before it finds us." The crew nodded in agreement, knowing that whatever they were facing was bigger than anything they had ever imagined. The universe had gone silent for a reason, and now they had a glimpse of the terrifying force behind it. They weren't just investigating a mystery anymore. They were preparing for a battle that could determine the fate of the universe itself. Arya looked once more at the dark expanse of space outside the ship's viewport. The silence was still there, but for the first time, she felt like they might have a chance to break it. But she knew one thing for certain. The real fight was just beginning. The crew of the Sentinel was no stranger to danger, but nothing had prepared them for what they were facing now. The device they had found was both a gift and a curse, providing them with answers while leaving even more questions in its wake. But one thing was certain. The silence was not just a quiet void. It was a force, something that could wipe out civilizations and leave nothing behind. Admiral Arya Lawson stood in the command center, staring at the screen showing the glowing symbols that had appeared from the device. It had been hours since they received the message, but the urgency of the situation was just starting to sink in. The silence was coming for them, for everyone, and they needed to be ready. "We need a weapon," Arya said, her voice sharp with determination. The crew's confusion was evident, but Arya's words were a call to action. Something that can fight back, something that can stand against whatever is causing this. Commander Ray, standing beside her, looked uneasy. "You think we can just build a weapon? We don't know what we're up against. That device, it's unlike anything we've ever seen." "I know," Arya replied, "but we have no choice. If we don't act now, there won't be anyone left to fight." The silence had already taken so much, planets, species, entire star systems, but it hadn't yet reached Earth. Arya couldn't let it. She wouldn't let it. "We have to combine our resources," she continued. "We have the alien technology from that ship, and we have the power of human creativity and ingenuity. We can do this." The crew quickly got to work. Scientists and engineers flooded the lab, brainstorming ideas and gathering materials. Lieutenant Oliver, who had shown a natural talent for tech, was already analyzing the device's data, looking for any patterns that might help them understand its origin. Dr. Hayes joined him, holding a datapad. "The symbols aren't just a language. They're a code. A blueprint, maybe. I think this device is a key of some kind. It's not just a message. It's a map to something bigger." "Something bigger," Arya repeated. "A weapon, possibly, or a way to control the silence." Dr. Hayes said, "Whatever it is, we need to understand how it works if we want to use it to our advantage." While the science team worked tirelessly, Arya addressed the crew in the mess hall. "We're about to do something no one else in the universe has ever done. We're going to create a weapon that can stop the silence, if we can get it right." There was a mix of uncertainty and determination in the room. The crew knew this mission wasn't like any they had taken before. They weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for the future of every living being in the galaxy. Hours passed, and the team finally began assembling their new weapon. It was a mix of alien tech and human engineering, powered by the strange device they had recovered. They had no idea if it would work, but they had no other choice. Arya walked through the lab, examining the completed weapon. It was strange, unlike anything she had ever seen, but there was a sense of power in the air as it hummed softly. "Ready to fire?" she asked. Lieutenant Oliver nodded, his hand steady despite the tension. "Ready as we'll ever be, Admiral." Arya took a deep breath, then turned to face the vast darkness outside. They had the weapon now, but whether it would be enough to stop the silence, to save the universe, was still uncertain. "Let's do this," Arya said, her voice full of resolve. The crew took their positions, and the weapon powered up. It was time to face the force that had consumed the universe in silence. The question now was whether they could break through the darkness before it was too late. The crew of the Sentinel stood in tense silence as the weapon hummed to life, its alien design glowing faintly in the dim light of the control room. Admiral Aria Lawson's fingers rested on the activation panel, her eyes focused on the enormous view screen in front of her, showing the empty void of space. For a moment, everything felt still, as if the universe itself was waiting for them to make the next move. "Are we ready?" Aria asked, her voice steady but carrying the weight of the moment. Her crew was gathered around, each member knowing the risks they were about to take. If the weapon failed, it could leave them exposed, vulnerable to whatever force had silenced the universe. But if it worked, it could bring back the communication, the voices, the hope that had been lost. Lieutenant Oliver was the first to answer, his fingers flying over the controls. "We're ready, Admiral. The weapon's fully powered up, and it's locked onto the coordinates of the center of the silence. We just need your command." Aria took a deep breath, her eyes flicking over the faces of the crew. They had all worked tirelessly to get to this point, and now there was no turning back. Their future, humanity's future, was hanging on a fragile thread. And it all came down to this moment. Could their creativity, their resilience, really overcome the force that had stilled the universe? "Do it," she said. The command rang out, and Oliver activated the weapon. A soft hum filled the room, growing louder as the energy built up within the device. It was as if the weapon itself was gathering the collective will of humanity, ready to unleash it upon the void. Aria's heart raced as the energy beam fired from the Sentinel and shot out into the darkness. For a few seconds, there was nothing. No sound, no change in the silence that had plagued them for so long. Then, a ripple. A crackling noise broke through the air, faint at first, but growing louder. It was like the sound of a door slowly opening after years of being shut. The lights on the ship flickered for a moment, and the screens around them lit up with data. The Sentinel had made contact. The silence was beginning to fracture. "Is it working?" Commander Ray asked, leaning forward in his seat. He wasn't the only one watching the screens closely. Everyone aboard the ship was waiting for any sign that their efforts had paid off. Aria's eyes widened as more signals began to appear on the monitor. They were faint at first, barely recognizable, but they were unmistakably voices. Distant, broken transmissions from across the galaxy. The silence was starting to give way, and the universe was slowly awakening. "It's working," Aria breathed, a smile breaking across her face. "We've done it." The crew erupted into quiet cheers, their hope rekindled. The silence, which had consumed them for so long, was now shattering. Signals from distant star systems, from space stations, and from other ships, some familiar, others not, began to flood the communications channels. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. The universe was waking up. But even as the crew celebrated, Aria couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. They had managed to break the silence, but they didn't know yet what had caused it, or what might still be out there, waiting. "Get ready," she said, her voice turning serious. "This is just the first step. We have to keep pushing forward. Stay vigilant. The silence might be breaking, but the force behind it is still out there." The crew's cheers faded as they prepared for what came next. The universe was speaking again, and humanity's voice had been heard, but there were still countless questions, and the answers could change everything. As the crew continued to work, Aria stood at the viewport, gazing into the dark, infinite space ahead. The silence was gone, but something deeper, something more dangerous, might still be lurking out there. The fight wasn't over yet. The ship's systems hummed with activity as the crew of the Sentinel watched in awe. The faint signals from distant parts of the galaxy continued to flood the communications channels, each one more distinct than the last. The silence that had plagued the universe for months was finally being torn apart. Admiral Aria Lawson stood in the control room, her eyes scanning the incoming messages, trying to make sense of the chaos that surrounded them. The crew had managed to break through the silence, but the results were overwhelming. Hundreds of signals, all coming at once, from ships, space stations, and planets, some human, others alien, were flooding in. "We've done it," Lieutenant Oliver said, his voice shaking with disbelief. "We've actually done it." Arya nodded slowly, feeling the weight of the moment. The silence had been broken, but it was far from over. They had cracked the door open, but what lay on the other side was still unknown. The energy pulse from their weapon had awakened something. Now they had to prepare for the consequences. "Admiral, we've detected a message," Commander Ray said, his voice urgent. "It's from Earth." Arya's heart skipped a beat. For months, they hadn't received anything from Earth. She stepped forward, her hands hovering over the console as the message began to play. To the crew of the Sentinel, the message began, the voice of a familiar, calm voice. "Earth's President, we have been waiting for your signal. The silence is not over, and we need your help. Something is coming. You must stop it before it's too late." The message crackled, but the words were clear. Something is coming. Arya felt a chill run down her spine. They had known the silence was a threat, but they had no idea what kind of danger lay ahead. Was it the force behind the silence that had made Earth disappear? Or was there something more? "Can we get a fix on the President's location?" Arya asked, her voice steady but filled with urgency. "Where is Earth now?" "We're still trying to pinpoint it," Oliver replied, his fingers flying across the console. "But it looks like Earth's communications are still weak. We'll need to locate a stronger signal." Arya glanced around at her crew. They had fought through the silence and managed to wake the universe. But now they faced something even more dangerous. Whatever had caused the silence was still out there, lurking, and Earth was in its path. "Prepare the ship," Arya ordered. "We're going to Earth." The crew didn't need any further instructions. They moved with practiced efficiency, each member of the team understanding the gravity of the mission. For the first time in months, the crew felt a sense of purpose. They weren't just fighting to survive anymore. They were fighting to save everything. As the Sentinel powered up its engines, Arya stood at the viewport once more, watching as the stars passed by in a blur. The universe was waking up, but it wasn't safe yet. There were still threats out there. And this was just the beginning. The crew had broken the silence, but the real fight was just starting. As they set course for Earth, Arya knew one thing. The galaxy's future was in their hands, and they would stop at nothing to make sure the silence would never return. The Sentinel was on a direct course for Earth. The crew had broken the silence, but now they faced the most dangerous part of their mission. Whatever had caused the silence was still out there, and Earth was in its path. The President's message had made one thing clear: something is coming. Arya Lawson's mind raced as she stared at the dark expanse of space outside the viewport. Admiral Arya Lawson paced in the command center, her thoughts sharp and focused. She had always trusted her crew, but this time they were facing something much bigger than they had ever imagined. The energy pulse from the weapon they had built had awoken the universe, but it also seemed to have drawn the attention of something powerful, something terrifying, and it was heading straight for Earth. "Admiral," Commander Ray called from his station, "we've picked up an anomaly. It's approaching Earth at an incredible speed. We've never seen anything like it." Arya's stomach twisted. "Can we identify it?" "Not yet," Ray replied, his voice filled with tension. "But whatever it is, it's massive. And it's moving fast. Any way to slow it down?" Arya asked, trying to keep her voice calm. "We've tried every tactic we know, but it's beyond anything we can handle. It's unlike any ship or weapon we've encountered before." Arya clenched her fists. She had expected a fight, but this was something else entirely. She looked out at the stars, feeling the weight of the universe pressing in on her. Time was running out. "Prepare the weapon," she ordered, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. "We don't have much time. If we can't stop it, Earth will be lost. The crew worked quickly, their hands moving with practiced precision as they readied the weapon. They didn't know if it would be enough to stop the approaching force, but they had no other choice. This was their last stand. As the anomaly drew closer, the crew gathered in the command center, watching the view screen as the dark shape grew larger. The space around it seemed to shimmer, as though reality itself was bending under its presence. It was like nothing they had ever seen. A strange, unnatural feeling filled the air. It wasn't just a ship, it was something more, something ancient. "It's here," Lieutenant Oliver said, his voice tight with fear. Arya took a deep breath. She had to remain calm. The crew was relying on her, and she couldn't let them down. "Lock onto it. Prepare to fire." The weapon powered up, its alien energy humming through the ship. It was their only chance. The silence had brought them to this point, and now they had to fight back. Arya's hand hovered over the firing controls, her mind filled with the weight of the decision. "Now," she shouted. A beam of light shot from the Sentinel, streaking across space toward the oncoming force. For a moment, everything seemed to hold still. The beam connected with the anomaly, and a massive explosion of energy erupted. The force of the blast sent shockwaves through space, shaking the Sentinel as the crew braced themselves. The enemy ship, or whatever it was, seemed to shudder, its form flickering. But then something even more unexpected happened. The energy beam wasn't enough to destroy it. Instead, the enemy retaliated. A wave of energy shot out from the anomaly, hitting the Sentinel with such force that the entire ship was knocked off course. The alarms blared, and the crew struggled to regain control. "Brace for impact," Arya shouted as the ship lurched. The crew held on as the Sentinel was tossed in space, but they weren't defeated yet. Arya quickly issued new orders, and the crew scrambled to keep the ship intact. They were in the fight of their lives, but they weren't giving up. As Arya gazed out into the chaos, she realized something crucial. The universe had gone silent for a reason. And now, humanity's voice would be the one to stand up and fight. The battle wasn't over, but they had shown the universe something it had never seen before: humanity's resilience. And that was something no force could silence. The Sentinel floated in the vastness of space, its hull battered and damaged from the last attack. The crew was exhausted, but they refused to give up. The anomaly, whatever it was, had proven to be more powerful than they could have imagined, but they hadn't lost yet. Humanity's will to fight had brought them this far, and they weren't going to stop now. Admiral Arya Lawson stood at the front of the control room, staring at the view screen. The shape of the massive enemy ship loomed ahead, still flickering with energy. It had taken everything the crew had thrown at it, and was still coming, relentless and unstoppable. But Arya knew they couldn't back down. This was Earth's last chance. "Admiral," Commander Ray said, his voice tight with stress, "the enemy is closing in on Earth. At this rate, it will reach the planet in less than 20 minutes. Arya clenched her fists. There was no time to waste. She looked over at Lieutenant Oliver, who was working feverishly at his station. "Oliver, do we have anything left? Any way to hit them with full force?" Oliver's eyes flickered over the controls. "We've got one last shot. The weapon's power has been drained almost completely, but we got enough left for a final burst. It's our only chance to stop them." Arya's heart pounded. They had no choice. If they missed this opportunity, Earth would fall. "Do it," she said, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "Give it everything we've got." The crew moved quickly, preparing for the final assault. Every person aboard the Sentinel knew this could be their last mission, but they were ready to fight. Their unity, their determination, was stronger than the fear that tried to take hold of them. With one final push, the Sentinel's weapon powered up. The energy built rapidly, lighting up the dark expanse of space around them. The crew held their breath as the enemy ship moved closer. Time was running out. "Target locked," Oliver said, his voice barely audible. Ready to fire. Arya took a deep breath, her hand hovering over the controls. This was it. Humanity's last chance. She glanced around at the crew, their faces filled with a mix of exhaustion and hope. They had come so far, fought so hard, and now they were ready to finish it. Fire, she ordered. The beam of energy shot from the Sentinel with a blinding flash. It traveled through the vastness of space, striking the enemy ship with a force so powerful that the entire galaxy seemed to tremble. The blast was massive, sending shockwaves rippling through space. For a moment, everything went still. Then, the enemy ship began to break apart. It cracked and splintered, its energy flickering out. The massive force that had been heading toward Earth seemed to collapse in on itself, the light from the explosion scattering in all directions. The crew stared at the view screen in stunned silence. They had done it. They had stopped it. The enemy was defeated. We did it. Lieutenant Oliver whispered, his voice filled with disbelief. Arya stood still, her heart still racing. It was over. The silence was finally broken, and the threat was gone. Earth was safe. Humanity had won. But even as the crew celebrated, Arya knew this battle wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. They had shown the universe that humanity's voice couldn't be silenced. The universe had been waiting for a sign, and now it had one. Humanity was a force to be reckoned with. As the Sentinel sailed toward Earth, Arya looked out at the stars. The universe was full of mysteries, and many more challenges awaited them. But humanity had proven that no matter how dark the silence might be, there was always a voice that would rise above it. And that voice would always be heard. The Sentinel drifted toward Earth, its battered hull slowly gliding through the calm of space. The silence that had once threatened to consume the universe was now broken, its weight lifted by the courage and determination of humanity. The crew had fought a battle no one had expected to fight, and they had emerged victorious. Admiral Arya Lawson stood in the control room, her eyes fixed on the Earth that was growing larger in the view screen. The planet was still there, still spinning, still full of life. And for the first time in months, the crew could breathe a little easier. Earth had been saved, and humanity had proven that it could stand up to the darkness that threatened to swallow everything. "Admiral," Commander Ray said, his voice steady but filled with relief, "we've received confirmation from Earth. They've picked up our signal. We've restored contact with the planet." Arya's heart lifted at the words. After months of silence, after the fear and uncertainty, they had finally done it. The universe wasn't silent anymore. The voices of Earth, of other civilizations, were alive again. "Good," Arya replied, her voice soft but firm. "Let's get us home." As the crew prepared to dock with Earth's orbital station, there was a sense of accomplishment in the air. They had been through so much together, and now they would return as heroes. But for Arya, the victory was bittersweet. The mission had been hard, and not everyone had made it out unscathed. But the crew had shown incredible resilience, and that was something she would never forget. "Admiral," Lieutenant Oliver said, glancing at his console, "there's something else coming through. It's a message from the rest of the galaxy." "Put it on," Arya ordered. The screen flickered, and the faces of various alien species appeared. They had been silent for so long, but now their voices filled the room. Some faces were familiar, others were strange, but all of them had one thing in common: they were alive. They had heard the Sentinel's message, and now they were reaching out. To the humans of Earth, one alien diplomat said, their voice calm but filled with gratitude, "We had thought that you were lost to us." The silence, it was a terror that shook the stars. "But now we know that humanity is stronger than we believed. You have brought hope back to the universe." Arya's heart swelled with pride as the message continued. The entire galaxy was waking up, returning to life. And it was humanity's strength, its ingenuity, that had made it possible. The universe had been waiting for someone to answer the call, and humanity had stepped up. "We are ready to rebuild," The diplomat continued. To work together, to learn, to grow. The silence has been broken, and humanity has shown us that no matter how dark things may get, there is always hope. The screen went silent as the message ended, leaving the crew to absorb the weight of what had just been said. The universe was no longer a place of quiet despair. It was a place of potential, of cooperation, and of life. Aria looked around at her crew. They had saved the galaxy. They had saved the universe. And now, they would return home as the voices that had broken the silence. "We've done it," Aria said softly, her voice filled with pride. "Now, we rebuild. Together." As the Sentinel docked with Earth's station, the crew knew that their journey was far from over. They had proven that humanity could overcome anything. And with that strength, they would continue to lead the way into a new era, one where the silence would never return. The universe had heard humanity's voice, and it was louder than ever. The new dawn had come.